In the year 1745, in the town of Isaka in the district of Ibo, within the kingdom of Benin, in present-day eastern Nigeria, a child by the name of Olaudah Equiano was born. Olaudah, in the Ibo people's native language, signifies vicissitude or fortune, also one favored in having a loud voice and well-spoken, unbelievably describing what his life would be like, one filled with fortune in the face of numerous evils. In his narrative, he tells a story of when he was younger and encountered a poisonous snake. In this encounter, the snake passed right between his feet without touching him at all, which was considered a good omen. Although this may just seem like a story, surprisingly, this good luck, or whatever it was, he carried with him for his whole life. Equiano grew up in a remote yet fertile and rich land of dancers, musicians, and poets. Major events were usually celebrated with these. The lifestyle of the Igbo people was simple, and everyone dressed the same. Convenience was valued over ornament, and wants were few and easily supplied. Their chief employment was agriculture, and many had slaves, something not uncommon. However, the treatment differed greatly from the slaves in Western nations, as they saw them as savages, and these were treated much more kindly and regarded as a part of the village. In addition, the Igbo also had manufactures and markets. They valued marriage and hygiene greatly, and believed in one creator of all things. As well, since many of them were involved in labor from young ages, regardless of gender, and showed hardiness, integrity, and zeal, they were greatly sought after by European slave traders. Olaudah was the youngest of his siblings, and the favorite of his mother. His father was a village leader and owner of slaves himself, and from a young age he was trained in the art of war. His future seemed to be a prosperous one, as he came from a successful family, and was most likely to be a leader in his community, following in his father's footsteps. However, everything changed when at age 11, while the elders worked, and him and his sister stayed home alone, two men and a woman captured them and took them into the woods. Like prisoners, they tied their hands together, and they walked on, stopping a few places at a time, until him and his sister were finally split up. This brought immense sorrow to Olaudah, who was only a young boy. Despite this, he was kept days and months traveling, jumping from one master's home to another. However, many were kind to him, even of one of them saying, "Indeed, everything here and all their treatment of me made me forget that I was a slave." By fortune, along this journey, he landed on the same home as his sister, but they were quickly separated once more, and this time, he would never see her again. He kept going this way from master to master until, in the middle of the night, he was taken away. They were taking him to the coast, and they traveled for 6 or 7 months, sometimes by land and sometimes by water, through different countries, kingdoms, and nations until they finally got there. The first things he noticed were the sea and the slave ship. He was amazed, but the feeling quickly turned into terror when he was taken in. In his narrative, he describes the atmosphere in the ship as so. "The stench of the hold while we were on the coast was so intolerably loathsome that it was dangerous to remain there for any time. The closeness of the place and the heat of the climate, added to the number in the ship, which was so crowded that each had scarcely room to turn himself, almost suffocated us. This produced copious perspirations, so that the air soon became unfit for respiration, from a variety of loathsome smells, and brought on a sickness among the slaves, of which many died. This wretched situation was again aggravated by the galling of the chains, now become insupportable, and the filth of the necessary tubs, into which the children often fell and were almost suffocated. The shrieks of the women and the groans of the dying rendered the whole a scene of horror almost inconceivable. The ship took them to Bridgetown, on the island of Barbados, to be bought. But nobody bought Equiano, so he was boarded on the ship again, with all the unsaleable slaves. and was taken to the colony of Virginia in the United States. There he was bought by a Mr. Campbell, but he was soon bought again by a friend of Mr. Campbell's, who liked Olaudah very much and wanted to take him back to England as a present for his friends. His name was Michael Henry Pascal, and he was a lieutenant of the Royal Army, who also happened to own a trading ship. Olaudah was taken on Pascal's trading ship full of crops, which was more comfortable than the horrendous slave ships. There he changed his name to Gustavus Vasa, what he became mostly known as for the rest of his life. And he met Richard Baker, a white, educated American who would become his friend, companion, interpreter, and teacher for the next 2 years. On the spring of 1757, they reached England. 12-year-old Olaudah marveled at the sight of snow, thinking that it was salt at first, and was taken to church for the first time. He was also surprised at the differences in customs between the Europeans and his people. For example, the Europeans did not regularly wash their hands, and they touched the dead. A little after their arrival in England, his master took him and Richard to the island of Guernsey, where they would stay with a family, who treated them as part of their own. By the summer of 1757, they had left Guernsey and returned to England. Pascal had been assigned on the warship HMS Roebuck, which fought the French in Canada over control of territories. Young Olaudah was taken with the master on this trip. He witnessed attacks and deaths on both sides, and in 1978, he was present at the siege of Louisbourg in Nova Scotia. After spending most of his time at sea, he was sent to London, where shortly after arriving, his master ordered him to wait on the Miss Garretts, who were 2 sisters. They treated him kindly and sent him to school, so that he could learn to read and write. While he was with them, he also became baptized in 1759 at St. Margaret's Church, Westminster, although Pascal was hesitant to allow this at first. Eventually, Olaudah left them because an expedition had begun for the Mediterranean on a boat named the Namur. On the ship, Pascal told him to inquire about his friend Richard, as he had been assigned to another ship, and Olaudah had not seen him since. Here he found out of his death, which deeply affected him. While still on the Namur, he also became involved in battles between the British and the French, as the French attacked their ship. He got himself in impossible situations, and despite getting into these situations, he always seemed to be one to survive unscathed. There were instances in which it didn't seem logical to survive, yet he did. In battle, he rarely got hurt, and once, when he was directly being aimed at, the shot missed him only by a little, and if it had hit him, he would have died. Instances like these shaped his belief that he was being protected. Despite the dangers, he loved the adventure, and in his narrative he even wrote, "I long to engage in new adventures and see fresh wonders." After their encounter with the French, the British retreated, but after Pascal had recovered, him and Olaudah boarded once more on another ship, the Atina. Here, Equiano was a steward, and he enjoyed this job, as it allowed him time to learn important skills and improve his reading and writing. On November 17